The humidity in Virginia Beach was a physical presence, a thick blanket that smothered the naval amphibious base Little Creek well before the sun even thought about rising. For the women of the newly integrated coastal riverine squadron, it was just another obstacle in a life full of them. Among the rows of bunks in the barracks, Senior Chief Petty Officer Maya Reyes was already awake, her eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling plaster. Sleep was a luxury her body had long since forgotten how to enjoy. At 34, she was a relic by SEAL standards, her body a roadmap of old injuries and hard-won muscle. The other women in the squadron, most of them a decade younger, saw her as a quiet enigma, a woman who spoke rarely and observed everything. The news had broken 2 days prior, sending shockwaves through the already turbulent waters of the Special Operations community, a joint reconnaissance exercise in the Colombian jungle. The objective, a simulated high-value target extraction deep in guerrilla territory. The kicker. For the first time, a female operator would be allowed to attempt the sniper qualification portion, a grueling test that involved a 2,000-meter shot through dense, humid canopy. Maya's name had been submitted by her commanding officer, a grizzled veteran who saw past her gender to the unparalleled patience and the cold, mathematical precision she displayed on the range. The common room of the barracks, a drab space with worn-out couches and a television always tuned to Sports Center, became a crucible of hostility the moment the announcement was made. Master-at-Arms Second-Class Kelly, get a blonde firecracker from Texas with a chip on her shoulder, had thrown a textbook across the room. 2 clicks in the jungle? They're setting her up to fail. They want a poster child, and they're going to get a casualty, she fumed. The men, when they bothered to acknowledge the news, were worse. Their ridicule wasn't loud or overt. It was the quiet, insidious kind. The smirks in the chow hall, the sudden silence when she walked into a room, the whispered jokes about trigger discipline that had nothing to do with rifles. Maya absorbed it all with the same stoicism she applied to everything else. She was a product of the foster care system of Los Angeles, a childhood spent shuttling between homes where silence was her only shield. She had learned early that words were useless. Only actions carried weight. And she had enlisted in the Navy at 18, looking for structure, found a home in the intelligence field as a cryptologic technician, and then, against all logic and physical possibility, had clawed her way through the preliminary screening for the newly opened combat roles. Her secret, the one she kept locked tighter than any classified file, was her vision. Her optometrist had called it a freak physiological anomaly, a cone density in her retinas that gave her eyesight a hawk-like resolution. She could read a license plate at 1,000 yards. She never told anyone. Let them think she was lucky. Let them think she was a quota. She knew what she was. The week before deployment, she sat alone in the quarterdeck cleaning her rifle. A customized MK-13 Mod 7 chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. The smell of solvent and gun oil was her perfume. Senior Chief John Mac McAllister, the squadron's senior enlisted leader and a man who had been doing this job since Maya was in diapers, paused beside her. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just watched her hands move with the efficiency of a surgeon. "You know they're all watching, Reyes," he finally said, his voice a low rumble. "Yes, Senior Chief," she replied, not looking up. "They want to see you break. The heat, the humidity, the bugs, the sheer weight of the pack. They think you'll quit before you even get to the firing point." She placed the bolt back into the receiver with a soft click. "I know, Senior Chief." Mac grunted. He crouched down, bringing his weathered face level with hers. "I've been doing this for 22 years. I've seen a lot of tough sons of bitches. Tough isn't enough for this, Reyes. You need to be something else. You need to be water. You need to be the mist that rolls in off the river. You need to be invisible." He stood up, wincing as his knees cracked. "Don't prove them wrong. That's their game. Prove me right." He walked away, leaving Maya alone with his words and the ghost of a challenge that felt less like an order and more like an absolution. As she racked her rifle, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished glass of a display case holding unit awards. She saw a woman with sun-weathered skin, close-cropped black hair, and eyes the color of dark obsidian. Eyes that had seen too much and revealed nothing. She wasn't angry at the men who ridiculed her. She didn't have the energy for anger. She was simply focused. In 6 days, she would be in the jungle. In 6 days, the noise of their doubt would be replaced by the sounds of the rainforest. And in the deafening silence of her own concentration, she would finally have a chance to answer them. The C-130. Hercules shuddered as it punched through a thick layer of clouds, finally descending towards the sweltering green cauldron that was the Colombian lowlands. Inside the metal tube, the air was thick with the smell of jet fuel, sweat, and nervous energy. Maya sat strapped into her webbed seat, sandwiched between Kelly, the fiery Texan, and a mountain of a man named Torrance, a DevGru operator built like a brick wall with a permanent scowl. They were a composite team, a mix of SEALs, SWCC, and support personnel, and all heading to the same hellish patch of jungle for the 2-week exercise Buey de Monte, mountain cow. Kelly leaned over, her voice barely a whisper over the roar of the engines. "You ready to be a mosquito buffet, Reyes? Hope you brought industrial-grade bug spray." Her tone was light, but the jab was pointed. Maya just gave a slight nod, not taking her eyes off the terrain map spread across her thighs. She was memorizing every contour, every river bend, every possible avenue of approach to their objective. Torrance, on her other side, wasn't so subtle. He jabbed a thick finger at her map. "You know the firing point is here." He pointed to a grid coordinate labeled LZ Rambo. "From there to the target box is 2,050 meters, through triple canopy jungle. You can't see shit. Nobody's made that shot in the history of this exercise. Not McAllister in his prime, not anyone. It's a myth. They just put it there to make us feel inadequate." He leaned back, a smug look on his face. "The rest of us will be doing the real work clearing the village. You'll be back at base camp, picking ticks off your legs." The landing was rough, the plane touching down on a dirt strip carved out of the jungle. The moment the rear ramp hissed open, the environment hit them like a physical blow. It was a wall of wet heat, so thick you could almost chew it. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of screeching howler monkeys, chattering insects, and unseen birds. They offloaded under a gray, overcast sky that promised rain and delivered it in sheets within minutes. The first 3 days were a test of pure survival. They humped 20 clicks to a forward operating base, on a tiny clearing barely large enough for a few tents. The mud was relentless, an ankle-deep, slippery goo that sucked at their boots with every step. Maya, carrying a pack that weighed nearly 100 pounds, kept her head down and her breathing steady. The men around her, even the fittest, were gasping and cursing. The altitude wasn't high, but the humidity was a thief, stealing the oxygen from their lungs. Maya just planted one foot in front of the other, her body a machine. Her slight frame, a disadvantage in a bar fight, was an asset in the mud. She sank less, moved with a fluid economy the big men couldn't match. On the 4th day, the sniper candidates split from the main element. Mac was leading the small team, which included Maya and 3 male SEAL snipers. Their objective was to insert 3 clicks from the firing point, and move into position undetected, and wait for the window. A 20-minute window at 1400 hours the following day, when the angle of the sun would supposedly burn through enough of the canopy to offer a narrow shooting lane. A lane no one had ever successfully used. That night, in their hastily constructed hide site, a shallow depression covered in camouflage netting, the psychological warfare began in earnest. The three men, Callahan, Sims, and a quiet sniper named Dietrich, huddled together whispering. Maya lay 6 feet away, her face smeared with camouflage cream, trying to ignore the steady drip of water from a leaf onto her forehead. "You see that shooting lane?" Callahan whispered, not quietly enough. "It's a myth. A goddamn myth. We're gonna sit in this stinking hole for 24 hours, get soaked. I get bit by everything with a pulse, and for what? So she can say she tried?" Sims snickered. "Maybe she'll get a participation trophy. The first female to miss by a mile in the jungle." Dietrich, the oldest of the three, said nothing. He just stared at Maya through the darkness, his expression unreadable. Maya listened. The words bounced off her, deflected by a lifetime of practice. She focused instead on the sounds of the jungle. She learned to differentiate the buzz of the mosquitoes from the rustle of a passing lizard. She cataloged the calls of the frogs. She became, as Mac had instructed, part of the mist. She didn't sleep. She didn't need to. She simply existed, a patient predator waiting for the sun to rise. Just before dawn, Mac slithered over to her position. His face was painted, but she could see the concern in his eyes. Intel update," he breathed, his voice so low it was barely audible. "Satellite pass an hour ago shows the canopy is thicker than predicted. That thermal layer they were banking on, it might not open. You might have zero shot. You understand?" Maya met his gaze. "Yes, Senior Chief." He held her eyes for a long moment. "You don't have to do this. We can call it a weather no-go, no shame in it. I didn't come this far to not look through the scope, Senior Chief." Her voice was just as low, just as steady. It was the most she had said in 4 days. Mac gave a single, sharp nod, a flicker of something. Respect? Pride? Crossing his features before he melted back into the jungle. As the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the thick canopy, Maya slowly, inch by inch, shifted her body. She checked her wind meter. 0. Though she checked her scope. Crystal clear. She chambered around, the metallic click sounding like a gunshot in the quiet morning. Now all she could do was wait and watch and hope for a sliver of sky. At precisely 1355 hours, the jungle held its breath. The incessant hum of insects seemed to dim, the howler monkeys went silent, and an eerie stillness settled over the hide site. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. The sun, a diffuse ball of light behind the thick clouds, seemed to be fighting a losing battle. Callahan shifted impatiently behind her. Sims let out a long, frustrated sigh. Then, at 1358, it began. A single, golden shaft of light pierced the canopy. It was thin, no wider than a dinner plate, but it was there. It touched the forest floor 200 meters to their left. Then another shaft appeared, closer, and it was like a celestial game of connect the dots, the sun burning small, temporary holes in the emerald roof. At 13:59 and 30 seconds, a shaft of light illuminated the precise piece of air where Maya's bullet would need to fly. It was less than a foot wide. The target, a simulated enemy command post in a clearing 2,050 meters away, was utterly invisible to the naked eye. She had to fire through a keyhole in the sky. Maya's breathing stopped. Not slowed, but stopped. She went into a state of metabolic shutdown that yogis spent decades trying to achieve. Her world narrowed to the crosshairs of her scope. She wasn't aiming at the target. She was aiming at a point in space 2,050 meters away, factoring in the Coriolis effect, the curvature of the Earth, the temperature, the humidity, and the fact that her bullet would have to travel through air of varying densities as it passed from shadow into those narrow pools of light.